Designing considerate products is going to be our first foray into the types of behavior that ideally we would like our software to exhibit. Simple enough claim, software should behave like a considerate human being. In other words, how a considerate person would act in the things that they would do. Why not expect that of our software? And in this section, we're going to have a look at a number of different elements or characteristics that we would typically associate with considerate people. And we'll then think about, well, what would it mean then for software to adopt those similar characteristics? There's going to be quite a few elements of it. Some of them you might not have normally thought of software interacting or acting in this way, but why not? We want our software to be as user-friendly, as supportive, as good as it possibly can be. And why not attach the same types of characteristics or assumptions that we would put onto a really helpful person and apply them to our software? Now, from a design point of view then, from us as developers, it means that for our software we have to proactively build in the interactions, the questions, and think about them that we would also expect a sensitive, a caring, a considerate person to do. And we also have to be wary of any actions that we take inside our software that if we thought if a person did the same, that individual would be considered as rude or inconsiderate, and to avoid those behaviours. So here's our first of quite a few different elements of what it means to be considerate. So considerate products take an interest. They want to know more about you, things that you like, things that you dislike, what your habits are, what your preferences are. And having collected that information, it then uses it to shape future interactions. So where preferences are to be presented to the user, if the software knows you like something or favour something, then it may already select that or offer that up as the recommended or default preference. So a key takeaway in this here is that if software looks at the actions of its users, what they tend to do, what they tend to prefer, and uses that then to shape future interactions, that offers a really powerful way of improving the user experience. And that's going to be true for basically all of the aspects of considerate software that we're going to look at. Considerate products use discretion. So in this sense here, certain types of information shouldn't be remembered unless the user has explicitly indicated that we can remember or use that. So things like credit card numbers, passwords, and so on. It's really important that if the user entrusts the software to remember something, that the software then looks after that really carefully, that it's stored in a sort of fully encrypted manner, it's held in a secure manner, it's only used in a really appropriate context. Because we have the user's trust then, and we do not want to abuse or to break that trust. Considerate products are differential. So users, what we've indicated before, we all make mistakes when using software. That's the reality. And whilst our users may make things that the software would consider a mistake, this is the key bit, that the software may consider to be a mistake. So it's an assumption that the software is making. That is not to say that the software then should limit the user's ability to still carry on. So maybe the user really did want to do that, and the software that's got it wrong. The user hasn't made a mistake, it's a purposeful choice. So considerate products are differential. If the user wants to carry on and to do something, let them do so. So unless the mistake is going to be fatal, it's going to halt the progress, it's going to stop it completely, what you should do then in the case if it's sort of will compromise it or you'll miss something out, is to explain to the user the consequence then that if you proceed and you don't have this piece of information available, then you're not going to be able to get this, or I won't be able to look up that, and that type of information. And it lets the user then make an informed decision whether or not they want to proceed. Considerate products are forthcoming. Quite often, most often, software, if the user gives it an instruction, it will follow that instruction in a narrow sense. It will do what it was asked and then no more. And if we think about some of the other aspects about taking in interest and other related ones, now even if the software has access to information that it's related to the user's request, and there's reasonable reasons to believe that it would be of interest to the user, generally that's not presented with it as well. So when we think about software being forthcoming, if we have additional information, additional insight, or additional content that we think would be beneficial to the user to support the request, then absolutely we should enrich the user's request to provide that. Considerate products use common sense, and very often this is lacking from software. It follows the rules, but doesn't necessarily apply what we would call common sense in terms of querying the outcomes of calculations, of lookups and things like that. So calculations, user input, they're not typically subject to much scrutiny to see if they're defined to be reasonable. And you can see on the screen, I mean, a couple of sort of screenshots that obviously fit into that category. But at what point, if it is something it calculates, for example, a monthly bill, at what point does a monthly bill become unlikely, unfeasible, too much, just a silly amount of money, and then shouldn't be presented to the user, but some additional course of action should be taken? If I think about a shopping experience, what types of items could be added multiple times into a shopping basket, and what types of items wouldn't typically be added multiple times into a shopping basket? And we want then to find a way of informing the user about that. Considerate products are perceptive and they anticipate user needs. And at this point you can see there's quite a lot of overlap between these, because elements of considerate software do overlap in terms of the set of behaviours that we would then typically associate with a considerate person, and hence also considerate software. So we've already said, I mean, most software is not perceptive. It doesn't seek to understand the bigger picture, ask the reason, why is the user doing this? They've asked me to look up something, but why? What is the purpose of this? Consider products that are perceptive, that anticipate user needs. They will try to think about the bigger picture. They will seek to understand what does the user want to achieve there through the steps and actions that they're taking. And then, having understood that, they'll supply additional information, they'll take additional steps then to support the user's wider goals. And that may be preloading a report because they think, oh, the user will want that at some point. It may be offering information or other options that they think this will be useful to the user's wider goal. Considerate products don't ask a lot of questions or burden users with their problems. And if you have software that constantly asks the user for permission to do this or permission to do that, or warning over here or warning over there, or this type of notification, you really need to think, does the user want to or need to be informed of all of those different elements? And if the user doesn't, then they probably shouldn't be bothered with those elements. So considerate software has the confidence to take ownership of its own decisions. And it doesn't require the user then to be able to confirm every single aspect. So it should be confident of its ability to make the right decisions. Considerate products keep you informed. So in that sense then, it's almost the opposite of this, but and this does tease into some of these elements here that whilst at face value, some of these elements may be contradictory. We've just said the user shouldn't bombard us with stuff, but yet here we're saying that it should keep us informed. Where there is information that it thinks we would like, it should make that information available to us. And this gets into the challenge about what we think a considerate person is. Very much a considerate person is somebody that does make those value judgments about what is appropriate and of use to the user at a particular point in time. So this is nuanced. It's not to say that it always will provide additional information, but whenever it thinks it is right and appropriate and welcomed and of use to the user, then it would do that. So there's always a fine balance to be got across the different elements we're talking about here. But when we think about considerate products keep you informed, Of course, we don't want to be pestered constantly with information, but if there is something that is of interest to the user, either their wider goals or the specific aspect they're looking at, we want to find a way of presenting this information to the user. And down the bottom of this slide, it makes mention to rich modeless feedback, and we'll look at that later on in this section. It's one way of presenting information in a way to the user that doesn't interrupt their flow, and it sort of incorporates that information into the display in the way the user can see it, can acknowledge it, can do whatever they want to do with it. But if they want to ignore it, that's 100% fine as well. Considerate products are self-confident. So it should have conviction in its abilities, in the decisions that it makes. It shouldn't ask the user, can I do this? Are you okay I do that? Is it okay? Are you happy for me to do it? These types of things. So it should be confident. And if there's a chance that actually, the user didn't want me to delete that report, or the user actually didn't want me to do this particular step, it should build in ways then of being able to recover, to bring the report back, to undo the particular step, and almost to prepare for those. So it should be self-confident of its decisions, but also providing a way of undoing those decisions if needed. Considerate products feel gracefully, and this links into the previous point, that unfortunately software probably will crash at some point. It's just one of those elements. It may be due to a bug inside the software, which we should get rid of. It may be due to problems inside hardware or other aspects of the wider system. So because even if you were to make a piece of software bug-free, because the wider environment you're operating in may not be free of problems, we also have to be careful that, well, what happens if I crash at this point? What happens if there's a power outage and power is cut off from the machine at that particular point, or the battery runs dead? So software does occasionally fail. If it does, we should design our software so it doesn't crash and burn. It doesn't put the user in a difficult position. Rather, in terms of using undo histories and other related activities, we should try to build in a way of recovering as best we can from where we were, so that the user isn't presented with too much of a challenge whenever they start up the software again. If you think about what a fantastic experience it would be for the user if the machine does suddenly shut off and the user thinks, oh dear, starts it up again, opens up whatever app you're using, and your app then is able to carry on seamlessly from that point. That is a fantastic example of how the user then will value and will trust that app. Considerate products take responsibility, and this is an important one. Quite often, whenever we're writing software and we have additional systems or services that we need to talk to, we may send a request off to those systems or services to retrieve some information or to look up some value or to do something, and we don't take any responsibility for that. If it comes back, or if it never comes back, or if it says, no, I can't find this information, all too often our software adopts the sort of computer says no. Well, can't do it. Tried asking this other thing, it's not able to do it, so I'm just going to give up. Software that takes responsibility for the whole interaction. So if they are using other services to fulfill their requests to the user, they take responsibility for those services. And they may have other ways then of educating information, other ways of backing it up, ways of presenting and talking to the user that explains the situation, and other ways of dealing with that. So it will assume full responsibility for all interactions that are made. And the last one we have in this section is considerate products help you avoid upwork mistakes. And it depends upon the application, but quite often for most applications there's some types of silly or awkward or embarrassing mistake that can be made. Typical ones we have here is if sending messages to unintended recipients or to everybody, or sharing information that should be confidential that you typically would not want to share. So a considerate product then will be mindful of those things. It'll keep a lookout for them. Again, mindful of what we said about differential products. It's not going to prevent the user. It's going to find a way of indicating to the user and just sort of asking them, you sure you want to do this here? and giving them an opportunity, if they want to change their mind, to change their mind. So that's all we want to look at inside this section. There's quite a few different elements. They do overlap with one another. They're quite challenging, and quite often the real challenge is understanding, even if you have all of these individual capabilities, how do you blend them together so that at a point in time you're using the right types of considerate behavior that are going to be most supportive to the user. Not easy, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it. If you can have software that's behaved in all of the ways we've characterized as being considerate, you have to admit that would be truly fantastic software. It's the type of software we would want to use because we know it's there, it's going to support us, it's going to be helpful, it's not going to let us down. So that's really, really powerful in terms of creating usable software. In the next section, we're going to go on to look at smart products and look at a few elements that can help build in some of that intelligence into our products. And that, in terms of how you can have smart products, would actually support or underpin a lot of the additional functionality that you would then create to provide considerate products. But we'll look at that next.